Roundtable. Thank you so much for joining us. Catalyst 2030 is a practitioner-led movement of cutting-edge social innovators, intermediaries, funders, and partners to achieve the SDGs. So this is part of our work to be able to work towards that goal, and we welcome you in these deliberations. So we are organizing as a community a campaign that's specifically around sharing social innovators' response to the COVID crisis, creating partnerships in response to accelerate the change, co-creating policy recommendations, which is really what we're focused on here today, and initiating dialogue with policymakers, funders, and leaders, which are an ongoing set of activities for the Catalyst 2030. Our goal here today is specifically focused upon the July meeting of the UN High-Level Political Forum, and it's reviewing progress on achieving the SDGs. We noted at the founding meeting of Catalyst 2030 in February that it was going to take almost until the end of the century to realize the SDGs at the pace we're going. So how can we greatly accelerate it? One of the answers, of course, is with funding systems and getting funding systems better aligned with the SDGs. So how do we actually do that? From this session, we want to have some proven solutions identified, some that are easily replicable, and policy recommendations in particular are the focus, which can expedite the type of change that we're all working for. So this is our agenda. We'll be having recommendations and discussions, people who are here to start off the actual discussions to see what we want to talk about. Myself, I will talk about supporting systemic investing for transformation. Harad will talk about strengthening the demand side of the equation, and Gary will talk about delivering big bets to social entrepreneurs. We'll have discussion then for about 10 minutes between the panelists and with you. We'll go into breakout sessions for about 20 minutes, come back and have a collective discussion for another 15 minutes or so, and identify some key conclusions that we can write up during this, for the outcome of this session. We will be then preparing a short 1 or 2 page set of recommendations, which will then be presented to a broader community in June, in preparation for a final document that will compile information from all of the roundtables Catalyst 2030 is sharing and delivered to the UN panel reviewing the SDGs progress. So starting with my own recommendation, I talk about the need for systemic change infrastructure. So I want to just go through that very quickly and explain to you what systems change financing is, systemic change financing. So it's got this connection of the long-term sustainability of investments to the health and environmental systems, the social systems. It's understanding the systemic impact, both of risks and benefits of investing. It's a commitment to align investment choices with societal and environmental well-being. And there's these 5 principles that have been identified by the Catalyst 2030 community to support this movement. So how can we do this? Well, I talk about systemic change and systems change finance infrastructure. And I talk about the importance of thinking of what is it like to design a systems change finance infrastructure. So if you think of all the components that we have today, from investment vehicles, organizations, relationships and networks and products, how do we create those for systems change financing and changing the world that we need? So we see it as an emergence approach. That is, it's going to happen over a period of time. And we also see that it is already happening if we pay attention to what's happening. So this is a product of an evolution from focus upon return on investments that in 1970s, 1980s developed the social responsible investment framework, which was a movement beyond that, then to the ESG framework, which is, and the impact investing frameworks, which are important today. So we're saying that we actually really need a new framework for encouraging systems change financiers. So there's lots of work conceptually on this. I noted that there were around 5 new papers coming out on this. I just saw before coming on this webinar, there's a new risk management tool coming out on systems change investing and risk to deal specifically with social environmental risks. There's high fragmentation within different modalities. What I mean by modalities are the science funders, the government agencies, the philanthropists, the high net worth people, the crowdsourcing, etc. Within any of these modalities, there will only be a small number today who are interested in systems change financing. So one of the core things is to bring them together because they don't ever get together. They feel that they're oddballs within their current system or financing communities. So there's a lack of identity and a lack of community for systems change financiers today. So some of the distinctive qualities of systems change financing that have to be addressed when governments put in place their policies are the sense of purpose. Just like the benefits corporations have had new legislation written for supporting benefits corporations specifically and their new sense of purpose, we need that type of work done by governments to support systems change financing. There are new investment technologies that need developing. They need to be addressing the complexity of systems change financing, the paradoxes of systems change financing, of looking to change the very system that you're actually actively working in. There's the whole question of risk and how we support risk development with systems change financing, a long-term horizon compared to today's general approach to financing. And we've got to do this on scale. You cannot change a system by modest amounts of money. It takes a large scale. So we need policies to support the risk sharing across the systems change financiers. Recently, there was changes to globally to the insurance industry so that it shifted from focusing upon payment for recovery from disasters to prevention of disasters. We need similar type of legislation brought into the investment world. We need to invest in systems change portfolios. Systemic change has to do with investing in portfolios of organizations around particular issues, around particular communities, and not just in a single initiative. Support for systems change products. One of the ones we're working on right now is prevention derivatives. Bobby Fishkin, a colleague in the Bay Area, is taking leadership with this, with the forest fires in the California area being a motivating case. How do we prevent forest fires and shift the investment to prevention rather than paying for the impact of them? Support for systems change institutions. We have the example of Project Heather as a new stock exchange, specifically supporting this type of investment in Scotland. Learning and expertise sharing. We need new types of networks. We need new types of addressing of questions, support for this and investment in this. We need to bring this all together with transformation expertise, because we aren't just investing in systems change, but the direction we're going is important too. And how do we create those processes, increasing our intelligence on those processes? Of course, as there will be significantly regulatory change, and there is work being done on new impact measures that needs further support. So I'll stop there as my contribution and pass the baton over to Harad. If you would like to present some thoughts of your own, Harad, for inputs to our conversation.
Sure, thanks, Steve. Happy to. Hi, everyone. This is Harad Sabeti. I'm with the Fourth Sector Group. We're a global platform that supports the development of an enabling environment for purpose-driven businesses. And of course, finance is a very critical part of that enabling environment. I was just kind of looking at your slides there, Steve, and thinking there's basically there's two parallel universes, and I experienced this a lot. There, in the finance world, in that domain, people have been asking themselves, what can we do to affect, better and more systemic change, right? And that has led to all kinds of innovations over several decades. Invention of new products, new approaches, new institutions, and so on. The object of finance, of course, is to basically put money into an organization, an enterprise, or an NGO, or some kind of an organization that on the other side is organizing the delivery of the public good that you're seeking. And there's very often people, they stand in one of those domains. If you're standing in finance as your platform, basically, if that's the center of your orbit, and you look at the world around you, you see a very different ecosystem than if you're standing in the middle of an enterprise, and that's your center of orbit or gravity. From the enterprise standpoint, finance is one of the resources that you need, but you also need access to good talent. You need an enabling policy environment. You need standards. You need all kinds of support services around you to be able to deliver whatever your mission is. And so the challenge that I think we have looking, if you look at this too narrowly from the finance direction, it's well, how do we innovate? You hold static the recipient of the funds, right? The enterprise that absorbs the funds. But you try to get dynamic or innovative around how we deliver finance differently. That only gets you to a fraction of the solution. If you stand in the enterprise, you see that you need finance as one of the elements of the ecosystem, but you need all the other aspects of the ecosystem in order to be able to deliver effectively. So I think one of the things that we need to consider as we think about what policies will unlock the flow of more resources into system change initiatives is what else do those initiatives need beyond capital to be effective? Because at the end of the day, finance, all the money in the world poured into these initiatives will not lead to success if the rest of the ecosystem around them is weak. So you're basically as strong as the weakest element in your ecosystem is, right? So a plant needs sunlight, it needs air, it needs a nutrient-rich soil, and so on, not just one ingredient. So I guess what I would sort of posit here is let's look at this conversation in a more expanded way, recognizing that finance alone can't solve the problems. And in fact, if we pay attention to the other elements of the ecosystem, the role of policy isn't just to increase the flow of finance, in a sort of with a discrete focus, but the role of policy is how do we create the right enabling environment for enterprises that are delivering systems change, and look at that in a holistic way, recognizing that if we strengthen the entire ecosystem around those enterprises, that the finance, there's a lot of money out there that wants to flow but can't, because the absorptive capacity of this space isn't what it needs to be relative to the scale of financing that could be available. So I think we need to think about this in a more holistic way on the call it the demand side of the finance equation. So that's just sort of my contribution to look at this broadly. Thank you, and pass it back.
Thanks so much, Harad. Holism and systems financing, absolutely. Gary White.
Great, thanks, Steve. So I know most of you on the call, but for those of you who don't know me, I'm the co-founder and CEO of water.org. as well as Water Equity, which is an asset manager that does social impact investing in the water and sanitation space. I want to talk about what was kind of billed as big philanthropy, and that's really trying to get bigger bets placed on social entrepreneurs who are focusing on systems change. And really what we have, I think, is a broken market here between social entrepreneurs who can have big impact and the funding sources that could flow into them. And I'm thinking, in your mind, think of this kind of as the cohort being members of the Giving Pledge who have pledged to give away half their wealth during their lifetime. And there's lots of other sources that can come into play as well. But that's one that I've kind of really narrowed in on more. And, why is this a broken market? Why aren't the funders finding the social entrepreneurs and placing those big bets? And I think one is like we are as social entrepreneurs focused on systems change, which is almost inherently more difficult to demonstrate than, producing a certain number of people getting access to services. In our business, for instance, trying to correct market failures around water and sanitation supply for people living in poverty and changing that system is much more difficult to get funding for than, say, if we went out and drilled 1,000 wells for people and 6 months from now they all have water. So there's this inability sometimes to translate systems change impact into something that is bankable and fundable and understandable by people who have this concentration of wealth. And I think there's also then, by extension, a lack of willingness to take risk on the part of big philanthropy, of philanthropic investors. And, you see some of the funders get black eyes, like Zuckerberg did with funding schools, in New Jersey and Newark, and it's kind of an embarrassment. So you almost have a little bit of a culture of not wanting to be seen as someone who has placed a bad bet. And so there is really oftentimes this risk aversion on the part of many of the people who have this concentration of wealth. And then I think they're not seeing social entrepreneurs as, Harat was just talking about absorptive capacity, like the sense that the people in this sector and the NGOs and social entrepreneurs are kind of the B team, right? The A team are the ones who go to work in the private sector and kind of go do things that venture capitalists will bet on, right? And it's like, the VCs, when they try to translate into venture philanthropy, they don't operate with the same mindset. So there's this lack of willingness to take risk on the part of systems change agents like ourselves, and the people who have done that in their day jobs, where they do place big bets through venture capital on big ideas. So what happens is that a lot of the money that does get dispersed goes to the safe bets, or what they're seeing as safe bets. And that really means, billions, if not tens of billions or hundreds of billions flowing into higher education, for instance, or the arts, or solving for a particular disease. And so that's what, we as the social entrepreneurs are kind of missing out on a lot of those revenue streams, those funding streams. And so what can we do about that? And how do we call this out? And if you look at some of the things that are happening now that are seen as solutions, I think they are helpful, but they're woefully insufficient. If you look at the emerging kind of dynamics of collaborative philanthropy with things like Audacious, Co-Impact, 100 and Change, what you see is a sense of trying to, almost from within, a lot of these Giving Pledge members are recognizing that this is a challenge, that we're not the only ones that have a money problem as social entrepreneurs. People who have the money actually have a money problem because they have already committed to giving it away. And if you're a member of the Giving Pledge or a leader in the Giving Pledge, and what you realize is that even when you sum up the giving of like Co-Impact, Audacious, et cetera, and add that number up, that accounts for less than 1% of the wealth that's concentrated in the Giving Pledge and in donor advised funds, which are, I think most of us are familiar with. It's money that's been given away, but has never yet created any kind of social impact. So you see this challenge from the perspective of the Giving Pledge members and leaders of the Giving Pledge who really believe that maybe it's not performing as it was intended, that those funds are not getting out there to the big ideas that can really create change against the sustainable development goals. So that's I think we need to focus on is this wealth. Last year, the 500 wealthiest people in the world, their wealth went up last year by 25%, which now represents $5.9 trillion. And so it's there. It's ostensibly pledged to be given away by most of these folks or by many of these folks. And now we just have a broken market because it's not finding its way into the social entrepreneurs and the impact. So how do we unclog this? I think what we have already in place is like this incredible networks of social entrepreneurs, whether it be Skoll social entrepreneurs, Schwab, Echoing Green, Ashoka, and trying to translate this into having shovel-ready impact that can be made through these organizations who are, literally starving for funding and are out there trying to piece together, this $100,000 grant, that $500,000 grant. What do I need to do to deliver a proposal that's going to spark the interest of a funder? And then what's the reporting going to be? How different is that reporting from the other reporting I have to do to other donors? So you create this whole kind of ecosystem of chasing smaller grants with increasing levels of complexity in terms of impact and reporting. And oftentimes you're not able to do what you think is the best thing to be done in your sector. And this may be after, having decades of experience as a social entrepreneur, you're there trying to bend your best practices and what needs to be done towards the whim of funders. And so we've got to help people understand that the social entrepreneurs are the experts, that they can have impact, and that they have smart ideas. And let's move this much more to an unrestricted funding approach with the big philanthropy to make this happen. Now you have a vetted group, of social entrepreneurs who have kind of this good housekeeping seal of approval, whether they be Skoll, Schwab, Echoing Green, Ashoka, or others, trust them and put money into them in an unrestricted way that allows them to go out and do this. Take some risk. Yeah, a lot of them might not produce the results that they had intended, but that's the way venture capital works, right? You only get paid off by 1 out of 10 of your big bets in venture capital. Think of that same mindset in this way, that yes, some of them are going to fail, but the ones that are going to go big can go really big. And think about placing bets, not of $1 million here and there, but like, are there organizations that are segmented out there that are doing this, that have the scale and the evidence base where they can absorb $10 to $100 million to be able to go and have that type of impact? So I think that's the kind of the subgroup of this funding systems change in Catalyst 2030 that I want to really push forward on and get as much momentum behind as possible with all the members of the group. So back to you, Steve.
Thanks so much, Gary. So let's take 5 or 10 minutes for collective questions or comments, and then we can move into the breakout session. I see that Sasha has asked how to strike the balance between the need for systemic change finance scale and experimentation learning course correction cycle. Well, that's a great question. I have a couple of thoughts about that. One is that's one of the reasons that you need long-term partners, because the payoff comes after initial experiments very often. And there is a high start cost on a lot of this experimentation. You also need it's valuable to have engagement across different types of blended capital, so that government is also involved if there's a social good that's being presented. And it's one of the reasons why it's so important to work collectively on development of the field of systemic change finance, because there are things to learn about how to do it really well and create that type of collective knowledge. Any other comments from Gary or Harad or any of people on the call now?
Gary?
No, that's good, Steve. I don't have anything more to add to that one.
Gary, it's Lewis.
Oh.
Hey, how are you?
Hey, jump in, Lewis.
Yeah, no, I'm just, I was listening to your comments, and I've been struck that, you know, when I look at co-impact and things like that, while they talk about systems change, most of what they funded so far is about scale, not systems change. And there is, and I can understand why, but there is a pretty high level of risk aversion in what they've done. Largely, they've funded things that have been pretty much proven. And I can understand why in the early stages, they sort of needed to do that as they were getting those funders together and keeping them together. But I think somehow we need to find a way to make them, to help them be a little less risk averse and to see the upside of taking these risks.
I think that's exactly right, and it's not a big leap because a lot of these people have made their money in Silicon Valley or in other businesses where, you know, they are always taking calculated risk, and that's how many of them have amassed their wealth, and that, you know, I wish I could show up here and say I've cracked that code in terms of how you change that mindset, but that mindset shift needs to change, and I don't know yet how to make that happen. Until it does, I think you're still going to see a whole different way of approaching philanthropy than they do approach venture capitalism.
Thanks so much. Any other questions?
Yes, can I chip in here? This is Sudhir. Gary, the whole idea of, I mean, taking forward from the last question, I think that was Lewis. Scale, okay. I get that the big money wants big scale. Getting there for a social impact kind of enterprise requires, I don't know, steps, right? I mean, the point is that you don't get there from 0 to 100. How does one articulate the big picture in a way that is not purely return on investment? We want patient capital, right? Now, I don't know how this thing is going to play out in terms of return on investment, but I do know that what I'm doing is going to get the eyeballs at some point in time, is going to monetize. But the immediate impact is livelihood, is going to be access to capital for in a small scale. I mean, we're talking about $15, $20, $50 for someone in India, a small craftsman. It makes a huge difference in his life, and multiply that to, I don't know, several thousands to begin with, and then to the millions. We have the scale in the numbers. How do I articulate this to someone who wants to look at, hey, how are you going to achieve scale? I don't know right now. Right now, I have scale of 1,000, 2,000 people. I know that if I get it right, it can reach 20 million, 200 million, because we have those numbers in India. But I don't know. I cannot definitively tell you that I am going to impact the 200 million in 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. But I can tell you how I'm going to impact 10,000 in 2 years. How does that come across to someone who wants to look at scale of 200 million?
So is that
Would anyone like to respond?
Me, Sridhar, or not? Steve, you can go ahead and shuttle it to wherever you think it belongs. I didn't know if it was directed to me or not.
I was just asking if anyone would like to respond. So go ahead, Gary.
Well, we're in this kind of in-between zone oftentimes between having a hypothesis or a concept of what could yield system change, and then what is going to yield systems change at scale. And I think that's what social entrepreneurs do, is they build out at least the beginning of an evidence base or a reason to believe in a hypothesis around systems change, and then try to translate that into messages and proposals and pitches that will then resonate. And you do kind of get to this point where, as Lewis rightfully pointed out, a lot of this collaborative philanthropy is aspiring to be about systems change, but really it's about scale. And so if you have to go to where the money is. If the money is in that scaling phase, then try to build the evidence base that's there. I can give an example for us, right? And it's about value creation. I think entrepreneurs and funders and philanthropists understand value creation. And what we've tried to do with systems change with water and sanitation is to shift from a model of pure philanthropy to go out and drill wells, for instance, to one that is about getting access to capital to people who are poor so they can get the water and sanitation solutions that are best meant for them. And what that means is now, instead of having to raise $2.2 billion in philanthropy to help 30 million people get water, what we've done is leverage $2.2 billion in market-based capital to help people living in poverty get water and sanitation. So they've done this through loans. So the value creation there is evident in the terms of the dollars that people have brought to this to solve the water and sanitation solution. If they didn't value those improvements, they wouldn't have taken out those microloans and made those improvements. And so this evidence base becomes much more concrete for us, for instance, because it's measured in dollars. With about $30 million in philanthropic capital, we unlocked $2.2 billion in market capital. That's the kind of, I think, evidence base that we need to be bringing as social entrepreneurs in terms of how do we articulate that in terms of value creation, and as much as we can, tie that to the actual dollar amounts of the value that we're creating for people who are benefiting, and translate that into the ratio of philanthropic dollars it took to get there. Now, that seems all very logical, and we've been trying to make that happen, to make those pitches. But even at that, it's hard to go with a scalable solution that has evidence, that's evidence in terms of dollars of impact and people's lives impacted, and still trying to make that connection. It's incredibly challenging.
What I'm hearing is that,
Gary. I'd like to, if I could, Sudhir, I'd like to move into, we've got 27 people on in the call, so I'd like to move into breakout rooms, and then we can have more participation. So I saw there was a question on the topic of evaluation. There's a new, it just came out to be just before this call. People interested in evaluation might be interested in looking at that particular link. So Anton, if you can divide us out into groups of 4 or 5, that would be most wonderful. And we can we can address these questions in particular. I'll just put them in the chat.
Okay. You just have to accept the invitation I sent you over the screen.
There are some people who are still not in breakout rooms.
Yeah, I will ask them again. The people who are not in the breakout rooms, can you hear me? Can you see me? You might see a message on your screen that appears now, and you just have to push join breakout rooms. Perfect. Deepak, can you hear me? Do you have problems? If so, then turn on your camera and we can discuss it. If not, just join one of the rooms.
Anton, I'm moving to the next
right.
roundtable. Okay.
Yep.
Someone has come back. Okay.
Yeah, I will reassign then if
Okay. Okay.
necessary.
Thanks. Ciao. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Don't forget, Anton, to try to see who will take it forward and which is the core committee, because
Yeah.
I had some more names coming in the core committee in my private chats.
Okay.
Okay?
Yep.
Okay. Thanks. Ciao.
Right. Hi guys, we are waiting until everyone from the breakout rooms is joining the main session. It will be continuing in half a minute, I guess.
Welcome back. Thank you. We've got a few more that might be joining us, but I think some people had to step out at the top of the hour. So let's go through the groups. Anton, were there, what, 4 or 5 groups?
There were 4 groups.
Okay, so let's have some comments from each of the groups. The group I was in, one of the concluding remarks, Sarah, do you want to, are you here?
Sure. As Samir said, it's not clear that we got to a packaged solution or a policy recommendation necessarily, but we reflected on the importance of building social relationships as a way to mitigate risk aversion in funders, and to build community and networks and relationships amongst both funders and practitioners who are working in this space, which is a long game work, but thinking about collective impact as a network, both with practitioners and funders. And that's a lot of my takeaways, so others should jump in if I didn't capture everything.
Thank you. Any other comments from group 1? No. How about group 2?
Who's group 2?
How do we know which group was? Okay.
We were group 2. I just wrote Anton a message. The host has disabled attendee screen sharing. We use the whiteboard to collect.
Erica, I just made you a co-host, so you can share your screen now if you want.
Thank you. Let's see if it's here or if I have to open it with Zoom. But yeah, let me stop sharing and open the Zoom file. We've been playing a lot with this in our meetings, and so it's a great way to capture that, because unfortunately, just FYI on the recordings, it does not record the breakouts, which is a shame because that's usually where the most fun stuff is going on. So let me just double check that this is the correct one. Yes, and good discussion. So share screen, whiteboard, go. All right, so we had a nice conversation that talked about exactly which systemic approaches we were considering, whether it was the ecosystem of funders itself or the systemic approaches to achieving social transformation and a more resilient lifestyle. And there were a number of examples from people's own work that were shared. And the emphasis on communication as a transformative tool, using technology in that communication suited to the groups that you're working with. So in this case, WhatsApp is becoming an important factor in that transformation. There was a discussion about building trust, and I put a comment on there about immediacy. A lot of what we want to do with social transformation is about building trust and bringing together this ecosystem of resources, and that's where the immediacy is really our challenge. And this is just my personal thought. You know, we are working and have been working for the 50 to 75 years that we've had, funding operations towards resilience. We have been trying to achieve that. It's that the timeline has now been sped up, and we need to be doing more, faster, untested things and then who has the responsibility if things go wrong. So certainly risk is playing a huge factor in that time pressure. But I liked a statement that was shared during our group about this being a course correction cycle, and looking at that in the context of how we address the flow of money, the social impact of what we're doing, the boundaries on metrics in order to better communicate our impact and that return on investment that people are looking for. Did I catch everything? I know we did a lot of chatting.
Yeah, the good effort, Erica. Really, thanks a lot for that.
I see I'm talking to myself. Thank you so much, Erica. And can you share that with us in an email? Thanks so much. Any other comments from group 2? Group 3?
We may have been group 3. Is any, I can go. I was a group and we all need to present, so I guess I'll just go ahead and jump in. I was elected to represent our group back to the main group. Just some comments, some notes I took. There seemed to, and this isn't surprising, a voicing of the need to spotlight the organizations that are social entrepreneurs that are getting it right in terms of systems change, and certainly a great appetite to have Catalyst 2030 serve in that role. And of course, a lot in terms of collaboration and, getting funding directed to collaboration kind of itself. Dan Veneman in our group kind of made the analogy of, this is the role that investment banks play during mergers and acquisitions. They are the ones that kind of understand the value and provide the funding, to bring the ideas together and the entities together. Selena in our group mentioned this need for access to more reliable data. That was another theme that kind of came up. And I think in the vein of how can we get the resources to generate the data, collect the data so that it can be presented as evidence to funders that the impact is happening. Some comments on can we create more cooperatives across organizations vis-a-vis SDG 17, and bring those collaborations together. So around the collaboration, Dan also mentioned, in terms of changing this mindset on the part of donors, think of them as investors as well. The concept of, impact investing and trying to demonstrate value creation in that way as well, where you can have social impact while also providing a financial return. And the concept that in the last 2 decades, about 2 billion people have lifted themselves out of extreme poverty. And should we be looking at this more from the perspective of seeing the constituents that we normally serve through philanthropy, seeing them as not a philanthropic problem to be solved, but more as markets to be served. And if we can leverage the number of people that have come out of extreme poverty as customers, and as social entrepreneurs evolve towards social enterprises, whereby we can provide financial returns in some of the work that we're doing, that would also demonstrate value creation to funders who would maybe provide that bridge philanthropy catalytically to help more of us become social enterprises, as opposed to just more NGO or philanthropy dependent entities. So back to you, Steve.
Thanks so much, Gary. Next group, is there a report out? Anyone who was in that group? Whoops, Harad, you're muted.
Yeah, I don't know if that's our group or not, if we're the last one, but I don't know, maybe Lewis or Rolf, you guys want to?
Sorry, it is you. Yeah.
Oh, it is. Okay. Hearing no takers. All right, I'll attempt to recap it. talked a little bit about what each person's organization is doing and sort of the challenges or opportunities they see in the space of systems change financing. Had a discussion about what the role of policy could be to address some of the gaps. You know, a bit of tension between can we expect governments to actually do something meaningful in a meaningful amount of time versus the role of philanthropy as an institution stepping in and absorbing more risk and trying to unlock more capital, therefore flowing into the space. It talked about the need for recognizing, for supporting SMEs, not just the money going to the big players. And yeah, anything, Lewis or anybody else? Rolf, you want to add to that?
No, I think that was a good job, Huron. I guess I would just add that broadly, the examples that were raised by Rolf and others pointed to a system that does not readily, which I guess we all understand, a system that does not readily deal with opportunities that may have a return, but don't meet the risk-return expectations of the normal financial markets. And that very large spectrum between anything that does meet those requirements and what would be a fully philanthropic opportunity. So somewhere in the middle there, my view is that even the philanthropic community is doing a very bad job of really taking the sorts of risks it should be taking for social benefits. Most of the so-called social investors and impact investors really don't want to take a lot of risk. Governments, with exceptions of things like development and innovation ventures at AID, are really haven't tried to do that, and even when they try, it's very hard for them. So again, we're back to trying to encourage the people with money to take more risks and to understand where those opportunities are between the normal risk-adjusted rate of return that a financial investor would want and pure philanthropy.
Thank you so much, Lewis. I'm just going to expand a bit on the comments in our session and integrate some things that I've heard. One is that we're presenting, it's often thought of as a problem of how to get capital to social entrepreneurs, as though the social entrepreneurs aren't doing something right. And then the other way is to think of it as the investors or the philanthropists aren't doing something right. And I think that maybe it's both of us having a problem here. And how do we actually create the spaces to be able to come together to collectively develop the solutions? It seems to me that we're both stuck in our own spaces somewhat. And then when we come together, it's around relatively transactional relationships. And one of the issues that I think I mentioned earlier, the opportunity that came up in our meeting yesterday, was how, if we think, and what Catalyst 2030 presents as an opportunity, is how do we think of ourselves as a collective community that can address a regional opportunity or an issue much more broadly than one of us can? How can we get into that space and relationship with each other rather than each of us being individual social entrepreneurs, but really creating a network, which I think Catalyst 2030 is aiming for, to be able to work collaboratively and bring all of that together. On the other hand, in the Catalyst 2030, I've been impressed that there have been some funders who have had people involved in Catalyst 2030. And it's been a very different conversation in many ways about defining how to fund Catalyst 2030. And how do we create those spaces where those networks, or sometimes I refer to it as social change financiers, investors networks, where we can develop those different types of relationships, because this is something we're both learning to do. right? We're both learning how to work with one another, not just the social entrepreneurs with the funders, but the social entrepreneurs with other social entrepreneurs as well. And that's one of the classic qualities of systemic financing, is that it's about investing in groups of opportunities, rather than thinking that investing in one thing is going to create the answer for a community. Any other thoughts people would like to share?
Steve, could you expand on that idea of that catches my fancy, the point of a collective. I see your logic that a funder wants to spread his risk, right? And when I say he, I mean them, the man, the machine, whatever.
Yeah.
So I think that's a powerful concept. So if there is going to be a collective of people working in the impact space in livelihoods, so a funder potentially is then investing in livelihood impact across the globe, across several communities, across several countries, or similarly.
Well, the way it was presented, we had at the School World Forum, I had somebody come in who has been developing this concept. He has 12 different investments in his portfolio. And you don't invest, just pick one and say, I want to invest in that one. He says, these are a set of portfolios. If you understand the way they interact, you will understand why there are a set of there's a set of organizations' investments here, rather than just one. And if you pull out one or two, well, maybe you'll still get some energy. But he says it's the combination of them that's really going to provide the difference. And he's looking at it from a very much a systemic relationship perspective, where he as putting together the portfolio, a key piece he's doing is putting together the relationships between different investment opportunities.
Yeah, there's a nascent initiative in India of some kind of a market, like a stock market for social sector investment. So what if there was a way to take that global? So you really spread your risk thinly. So the money is not chasing a larger risk in a riskier third world country, but spreading it across, I don't know, several markets, so to speak. I mean, I'm speaking the.
Well, this was another participant in that School World Forum session I put together was Thomas Carruthers, and he's starting the stock market, he's calling it a social enterprise and social impact stock market. And he's not taking it's not the traditional business he's funding, right? But he's aiming at finding ways to really reduce the transaction costs for investing in one small enterprise by bundling money to be able to invest in bonds for social enterprise. That type of transformation or transactional innovation, product innovation. We do need these types of new institutions to be able to handle this type of transaction, because there's a lot of learning that is accompanying doing this system change finance, because we don't know how to do it really well yet, right? This financier who had the 12 products together, he'd say, well, I think they're the right 12, but I don't know, I'm gonna have to experiment with it. And we've got to carry on those types of experiments. So what I'm urging all the time is that the investors see themselves as not just being an investor in a social enterprise, but to think of themselves as a social enterprise. They are themselves learning how to invest in social enterprises. And that requires a social enterprise mentality. you know, where you have a passionate people, you have committed people, you have the resources, certain resources that are brought together, certain network relationships. So it's sort of turning the mirror on the investor themselves. Are you really a social enterprise investor? I mean, how would you be able to become a much better one? And as far as they've got, generally speaking, is going to social impact investing conferences and social impact investing conferences. And what we've got to do is set up more long-term places where we have meaningful and authentic and deep connection between those with money and those who are doing the enterprising work. That's part of my whole theory about it. It's very hard for an individual who's being invested in to talk to a financier directly very often. Often it is. I mean, of course, we always have exceptions, but.
So what is this forum talking about and talking to? So what is the story and who is the audience? This, I'm now talking about us here right now in this. What is the story we're telling and who are we telling it to?
Is that a question for all of us? Yes.
Yes. Wow, that's a deathly silence. I think we have a problem right here. So we don't know what the story is, and we don't know the audience we're telling it to. So what the fuck is the system we're trying to change?
I think.
Well,
Okay, I can say something, if it's okay.
Go ahead, Rolf.
Yeah, well, in the beginning of the session, it was quite clear that our solutions were supposed to, or suggestions were supposed to be brought forward to governments. And at least in our group, we discussed problems with governments where they make wrong decisions and the impact they want to make that fails. So I think the audience is in many cases governments, and also investors. That was the other part we were discussing. So anyone who has an influence towards governments within their position or connections, that's one way to influence things from these sessions. And also people who have connections with investors to help them broaden their vision and reach out through these networks which are created within this space. So I think we are doing very well, actually.
I think part of the audience too, and I say this as someone who is who was formerly a banker, now working for a charity, is to become familiar with this growing audience of people who do want to take, like Steve, a systems change perspective to funding things. It's still, it's fair to say, an emerging funder class. That's to describe them that way. And it's about becoming familiar with what their wants and expectations are and what the challenges are, and so that we can try to collectively, for people who are willing to embrace that perspective, try to get closer to what needs to happen to make that a reality. I'd add, I think we also, I don't know who mentioned that point on, well, I think in our group, I was in group 2, by the way, with Erica, and we spoke about, they call it different things, social hubs, innovation hubs, these hubs basically where multidimensional conversations, sort of participatory conversations sort of happen. And it seems to need to become more of a way of working as opposed to this sort of, institutionalized thing, but more of a general way of working. I think it was Gary who made the point of bankers again. I think, again, having been one formerly, I'd like to see, or origination as it's termed, sort of become less of a matchmaking exercise and more of a sort of systematically consortium building exercise when you're looking at a problem from a social perspective and from a broader perspective, so that when you talk about funding, you're no longer talking about funding a particular project or something, but you're really talking about funding different aspects of a problem with different types of funders who can participate from a grant perspective, government / tax perspective, commercial funding perspective, etc. But I think there is one of the big glaring point is this sort of need. I think, as Steve, again, you alluded to, this need for more places for this sort of collaborative conversation to happen, and this, almost as a way of working, and it doesn't seem to be quite. I mean, it's happening, but not quite at the scale, I guess.
Yeah, when we come, yeah. Can I say?
We've got one more minute. Last comment. Thank you.
Yeah, the thing is that there is, everybody has to be a speaker and as well as the listener in this whole system change process. There is, everybody is an audience and everybody has to also talk and tell. So it is a very dynamic, interactive process with all stakeholders communicating to each other. And I don't think it is either a one-way traffic or a two-way conversation. It is a group effort, group of people networking and interacting and trying to bring a holistic solution.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Sankara. I just want to leave 1 minute for Harad and for Gary. Any closing thoughts that you'd like to share? Thinking, what is the policy recommendation you'd like to make to this UN panel?
Well, to the UN panel, I think it is leaning more into concepts like public-private partnerships, recognizing that governments don't have all the money to solve for this, but they have to be a central player, playing a central role at the table. I think policies that allow freer flow of capital into and out of some of the countries where we need to operate. I know we run into challenges with that quite a bit as a social enterprise. We don't have like armies of attorneys and folks to be able to sort through that. So tearing down some of those barriers to the flow of capital for social enterprises, I think would be another thing, because I think we've all recognized today and throughout with Catalyst 2030 is so much about the SDGs is all about money and investment, as well as leveraged philanthropy, social impact investing. And the more we can do to drive down the friction in the financial systems, the better we're all going to be able to do our work.
And I would say for governments, in the same way that we think that we invest in creating a market for entrepreneurs pursuing solutions to all kinds of problems in the for-profit space, we would create an enabling environment for entrepreneurs and enterprises that want to pursue solutions to social and environmental problems. So investing in the R&D, building the capacity of the field, helping create standards, fostering more collaboration, basically market creation and market building in the social space is as critical as it is in the sort of traditional market space. And we know we have the tools with which to do that kind of full spectrum ecosystem development already. We just have to apply it to a different class of organization pursuing a different set of goals. And we need to do it very urgently, given the range of crises that the world is facing.
Steve, you're on mute.
Muted.
We want to condense this into a 1 or 2 page document. Is there anyone who's willing to help work on that? Thumbs up if you're willing.
Yeah, I am okay.
Okay, that was Sakara. Yep.
Yes.
And
Sakara.
Selena.
Can you write it down again, Steve? Because I'm also in a
Okay.
close to another
Selena, Serna, and Sakara, Raman,
Yeah.
Srinivasan.
Yeah, that's right. Sankara.
I think Erica had a lot of points on her whiteboard, which is already shared. So that should take care of our group.
Okay, were you offering Sudhir to?
No, I was not. I was volunteering Erica.
Kaushik, are you offering to work on this? We'll get in touch with you too.
Yeah, I would love to.
Thank you, Kaushik Reddy. Okay. Well, we'll be having, Rolf, is that a yes from you? Yay, thank you.
Yeah.
So we'll be having our next session on July the 16th or 17th. Does it make any difference to you? What we'll be doing in the next session is reviewing the 2 page document.
June.
I mean, June, sorry. Thank you, Anton. We'll be reviewing the 2-page document that we come up with. Does it make any difference to any of you whether it's June the 16th or June the 17th?
We can also discuss this later. I mean, there are still a few open spots, so don't bother about the dates. But if we have the core group, if we can share the names of the core group.
Okay, well, let's just say June the 17th at the same time.
Okay, I will post it. Yeah.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay.
Very much
Thank
also
you.
to the speakers.
Thank you.
And Steve, can you just share the names again with me? Because I wasn't writing at the time, so that would be
Okay,
perfect.
Rolf Hellberg, Selina Serna, Sakara.
Wait, did you already write it down, or?
No, I haven't written it all down.
Okay, because
it'll be on the recording, though.
Yeah, true. I will share it later. Okay, perfect then.
Okay. Thank you so much. We'll be back in touch.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye
Thank
bye.
you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, Anton. Good job.
You did the whole job. I was just the technical support.
Well, if we aren't a team, we don't get anything done. Thank you for your help.
That's the main point. Nice. Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.